Good evening. In 2 or 3 minutes, let's get a little introduction to you and who you are.
Alright, my name is Ben. I was originally born in Elk Grove, California. I actually lived there for first 10 or so years of my life. Yeah, Central Valley. Then we actually moved out to Colorado. Hopped around to a few different cities, went to Broomfield, then Thornton, and now finally ended up in Lafayette. That's where our parents are now. Just kind of been moving around a lot, it feels like, in my life. I've joked that every 9 years of my life I have to move to at least a new state. Because first it was California, then Colorado, and now I'm here in Wyoming. Yeah, and when I turned 18, came here to Wyoming and started my undergraduate major, originally in mechanical engineering and English. No, just English now. Did not dig engineering. It was not for me. That was more of a safety net kind of thing, and I just couldn't. English is what I care the most about, and it's always been my passion and what I love, and that's just what I want to do with my life. Like I can't not do that.
Do you think that the works that you're studying in your English program are works of art?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question to me. Like, I mean, I have a hard time defining what art is, period, because I throw myself around into a lot of different hobbies and such, yeah. But for me, literature and writing and reading has always been first and foremost. It's always been the most important thing in my life, and it's been the most important factor in who I am today as a person, I would say, because, I mean, the very first book that I ever read, I had a giant, like, 200-page compendium of Curious George. My parents could not take it away from me.
That's awesome.
Eventually, they found out that I wasn't reading it anymore because I had memorized it. I was just flipping through the pages and just saying it to myself. And they eventually took the book away, and I just, like, kept reciting it. That's where that's been my life. Like, and I don't know, I think all writing is in some way expressing something that the author feels needs to be expressed, whether that's a feeling, a message, just a general idea. Like, art is creation. It's how humans break the laws of physics. Like, mass cannot be created, or matter cannot be created or destroyed. Art doesn't follow that. Like, we create art. It's the one thing that is like, it's the one thing we have to explain and figure out the world and ourselves and everything in it. And, yeah.
So why then the written word versus other forms of art, such as like pictures, movies, or paintings and things like that? Honestly,
I feel like it's mostly a upbringing thing. There are certain... Literature has always moved me the most. Like, that's basically what it comes down to, period. I get the most from it. It's shaped me the most throughout my entire life, my upbringing, and it's been the most instrumental, emotional, and intellectual factor in my life. That's not to the exclusion of other modes of art, because I personally think that every mode, whether it be music, visual, film, literature, they all exist because they all have something unique they express. It's fascinating how different modes go about expressing similar things or the ideas that they're trying to get across. Like, but literature, I think there's just a special place in my heart for the language and the actual just making everything happen with such a constrained, or you would think constrained, parameter of one language. And then the explosion and just the variety that exists nowadays in just the English language, which is only one language that's honestly not that old. Like, the ways that people can toy with that and just bend it to their own needs and creation, and literature is for me just the most powerful expression of creativity and the most meaningful way to communicate truths about reality.
Do you find yourself still drawn to a lot of picture books?
You know, actually not so much. I think movies have replaced that for me, but yeah.
In any sense, can you imagine a world without your chosen form of art, like without the written word expressing like people's biographies or fictions, or just getting their creativity out through written word?
I really don't think there is. If there can be a world without art, I can't imagine it. It's been with us from the beginning. Before even writing existed, we had storytelling in the forms of oral storytelling. That's how, like, the very first piece of written text we have in the Western world is Homer's Odyssey. That is just a transcription of a story that has been passed down orally for generations. It's not the first iteration of what happened. And so no, I don't think there is, I think it's inextricable. I don't think that we can separate storytelling and art and literature from the human experience. It's how we understand the world the most clearly, and it's how we get most of everything we have today. There is no culture as we know it, or at least I can imagine, without art. Yeah.
Without that specific one? Like without like that creative written word? Because the world with just like instruction manuals and technical writing would be awful.
Oh my god.
You know what I mean? Like that was the only written word.
I mean, there's a certain, like, even, I mean, that's not just to say that fiction is the only form of literature that has that expressive value.
Sure.
Like, I just finished reading a incredibly moving book about the ironically named Congo Free State in the last century that was part of the scramble for Africa and involved the death of about 10 million Africans just in the Congo. And wow. It's a nonfiction story about history that is reliant a lot on primary sources and numbers and statistics, but it's telling a story still. It's not, just because it's nonfiction doesn't change anything. Like,
sure.
There is truth in fiction and nonfiction, whether it's facts or not. And I don't really think that even creative and technical writing has its own expressive purpose. It might be a little more dry, it might not be
sure.
It might not be as imaginative, but it still has an integral artistic role in our society. You're still making decisions when you're writing out a technical document on how to put together your IKEA furniture in the most mundane example possible.
Right.
Like, you are still making choices how to present this information in a linear fashion. Like, this step first. Okay, first you have to get the pieces, put them like this, then screw them in. You have to put them together in a logical order, probably with some visual diagrams as well. And there is no writing that doesn't involve conscious decision making and composition. There's a reason for everything, mm-hmm. and there's a reason for why you put together the thoughts and ideas the way you do on the page, which I feel like writing really forces anyone who participates in it into do, because there's nothing but the words on the page, and you're putting all of those words on the page. You are in complete and total control, and you're fully conscious of it the entire time you're doing it, and that's insane.
That's a great way to word it. So earlier you had touched a bit on Homer's The Odyssey. So Homer is obviously a very prevalent author in the English department. Like, people have been studying him forever. Like, he has shaped past authors and will continue to shape future authors. Are there any other authors that you feel? What are some other authors that you've been influenced by? Yeah,
I mean, I mentioned Homer just because he's the oldest.
For sure.
I'm not particularly moved by Homer, although there are some fascinating episodes in the Iliad, which I much prefer to the Odyssey. But the authors that move me most are able to, they fully understand what the written word is capable of. I feel like they're playing with the form and the function, because you can't separate those two. I remember there's turning points in my life that I can point to that are because I was reading this book at this time. The first time let's see, in my junior year of high school, that was when a very dramatic shift came, and I left my very stupid young years behind.
Sure,
I remember very clearly, I was behind. I had a research paper to write on comparing two texts, Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment and Albert Camus' The Stranger. Hadn't read either yet, had to have the first book done by the next day, so I started reading The Stranger. It's like 100 pages long. I was like, okay, I can do like half of this tonight, half of it tomorrow morning. I start reading. I keep reading. I don't stop reading. I get all the way to the end, I'm crying. There's just a shift. There's a certain point in the book where Mersal, the protagonist, just accepts his life and begins to reckon with how he feels the universe works and his system of reality that he's come to figure out. Which isn't to say it's the right one, but it was a different one than I'd ever thought about. And that's the real key, is that I was forced out of my normal way of looking at things. It tore the veil off of my like normal, mundane way of looking at things and moved me in a way that is irrevocable. Like, there's no going back. Once you read a great piece of art, whether it be from Don DeLillo, Herman Melville, Cormac McCarthy, these are like some of my favorite authors. Once you interact with those, they change you. You're not really in charge when you're reading. The book is working on you, and you can't really get away from the impact that it has. It will change you and just grab a hold of you, and you just kind of have to go along with the ride and let yourself experience it. And I think the best authors do that in ways that no other art form can, for me at least. And yeah, no, Moby Dick is probably my favorite novel of all time. Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian was definitely another one of those turning points. Almost a little over a year later, I was actually reading that on the bus ride home from my summer football camp, which you would think would be an awful place to read.
Right.
And it kind of was, but it was good enough that I couldn't put it down. Because I'd been reading it before. I was like, okay, I'll take it with me on the bus. Couldn't stop again. It had grabbed me. There was nothing I had to finish this experience. And I can rattle on all day about books that have changed. I honestly tie changes in my life to books I was reading at the time. Like, there's physical, literal, mental differences that occur because I experienced this piece of literature. Like,
so there's no other form of art that has left you so enthralled and left such an impact on you than literature?
For me personally, no. Nothing comes close. Film is up there for me in terms, it's getting there, but I don't think anything will ever unseat literature from my heart.
So you would always read a book over picking a movie if you had to pick one?
Well, that's a whole different question. There's a lot more investment in just in terms of efficiency of time. It takes a long time and a long engagement with a book to really finish with it. And so, there's a lot of movies that are like that too. I don't want to disparage other forms of art. They just don't move me quite as much as literature does. I've had movies that have changed me as well. Not as many, and I don't feel as deeply, but it is a fantastic medium for expression that does entirely different things from literature. Literature forces you to read linearly because you're going word by word by word. You have to follow it and process it in that way, whereas film is multimodal and simultaneous, and you're taking it all in at once. The music, the composition, the words, the actual lighting, just the colors, it's everything at once. They don't have the same job. They're different forms of art.
Really how art works though?
Absolutely, yeah. Art is we reflect a lot of ourselves into the art, and art shapes who we are, and a lot of that is just the ones we respond to are the ones that we allow to affect us and allow to change us, and that's been literature for me, no question.